Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today. Turns out to be a sad day in American space history as we've lost Frank Borman at age 95. The oldest living astronaut has passed away. Truly an American hero, the commander, of course, of the Apollo 11 or 8 mission that took mankind on its first journey to orbit the moon in December 1968. And we will certainly be filled with tributes from now until that mission is relived uh, from 1968 here in 2023. 55, that'll be the 55th anniversary of that. Double nickel and 95 for Frank Borman. Uh, we got word of that from our good friend Tom Usiak, whose photographs we're going to see of a historic shuttle launch, 51A, that back in 1984, I believe, November of 84, it's one of the shuttles in November, did something that everyone was excited that the shuttle would do, be a space truck to not only deploy satellites, but retrieve them, bring them back, and fix them and take them back to space again. So we'll talk about that mission a little bit. We're also going to talk about Apollo 4, which is the first all-up flight of the Saturn V rocket. A very historic flight that a lot of people overlook. But you see it all the time because the cameras it took up with it show the imagery of the stage separation of the Saturn V that you see on every documentary, because I don't think they did it again. So I wanted to say hi to my partner, Marty Winkle. Good day, Marty. It is really a sad day. I kind of, as it sets in, just knowing for an hour that we've lost Frank Borman. What an influence on my childhood that man was. Have you got a comment about the Frank Borman there before I give a little thumbnail of his biography?
No, no more than what you said, Mark. Just a just an icon.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Marty. Icon. I mean, he is really on the Mount Rushmore up there with uh, uh, Armstrong, in my opinion. Of course, Shepard, maybe Glenn, but you could pick your own. But you can't do a Mount Rushmore of space astronauts and the moon race without Frank Borman. We'll get to him in just a second. We are going to do a major Galaxy of Giving tomorrow. Outline some of the gifts that you can get as we've gotten in this week and a very busy week. We did not plan on two events that came together the last 3 weeks, literally. So forgive us if things are on the fly, because that's the way they are, particularly with the Jack Loudon Rusty Schweikert autograph session a week from today in our museum. If you're going to be here, you got to be here about 11:45. They'll be leaving and having lunch shortly afterwards. Our website and Facebook have the revised autograph that you're going to have to pay for. That Nikki Stott's going to be here with her book, Back to Earth, a book signing only for her on Saturday, November 18th. The Loudon Schweikert quickly goes like this. It's $160 to have both those gentlemen sign something, whether it's a lithograph of Jack, a lithograph of Rusty. Put them together, that's $160. You get two of those, that's $320. If you want an extra picture of Rusty, that's $100. All right. Or two extra pictures of Rusty, that'd be 200 extra bucks. So, but if you pair them up together, it's 160 times whatever. And the window's closing for anyone to send us anything. But it's going to be a great event, and we're thrilled to do this for the documentary makers who will be on Stay Curious, hopefully Wednesday of the event, and Alexandra and Dwight. Vendors tables are still available. I got to call a gentleman when I get off here to tell him we still have a few spaces left, and we'll talk about that in detail tomorrow also. But thank you, Bid Again Auctions, Computers Advancing Education, and the Museums of Brevard for sponsoring this. I am the outgoing president of the Museums of Brevard, so but they will be sponsoring some other events here. 22 beautiful museums that preserve the heritage in Brevard County, and the Computers Advancing Education have put in the hands of thousands of school kids their much needed laptops so their parents don't have to buy them. 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Yes, we do know that is Veterans Day, and we honor our veterans, of course, like Marty, Vietnam veteran, and Marty Winkle, my co-producer here for you newcomers. But we honor our veterans, and at 11:11, Marty, we're going to have a moment of silence to think of our veterans there. But all the memorials and so forth are usually in the morning, so you can come on by in the afternoon and get some swag. Well, on with Mr. Frank Borman, shown here in the Apollo 8 command module, which they didn't have to give a nickname because it was the only vehicle in space. He has died at age 95, born in Gary, Indiana, and it is reported by Robert Perlman and his wonderful Collect Space website that does a lot of space history also. I'm getting this from Robert Borman, who was at one time a member of our board here at the American Space Museum. Thank you, Robert. Borman's death on Tuesday, November 7th, was first reported by the Wall Street Journal. A member of NASA's second class of astronauts, Borman lifted off twice into space. He had a Gemini mission, of course, with his longtime best buddy, Jim Lovell, who now becomes the oldest astronaut, who was just 11 days younger than Borman. Apollo 8 was also the last of NASA's pre-space shuttle crews to all be living. Think about that. Who we just lose, Marty?
Ken Mattingly.
Ken Mattingly of Apollo 16 there. So some people say these things come in threes, so hold your breath, I guess. Borman, of course, was a Gemini 7 with Frank, with Jim Lovell, and launched on December 21st, 1968. Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders became the first astronauts to ride atop the Saturn V, which was at the time the most powerful rocket on Earth. And the irony is that he dies on the day that the first Saturn V was launched, called Apollo 4. We're going to talk about that historic flight. So that's pretty cool, I think, to go out like that. Here's another picture of Frank that Robert Perlman had on his site. Very unusual picture there, looking in the command module of the Gemini spacecraft there. Borman said this in a 1999 oral history interview about the Saturn V. He said, quote, "The Saturn V was a unique vehicle. It was powerful and noisy and vibrated, and the stagings were really kind of violent. But when you got on the third stage, the S4B, it was smooth and quiet." And to be a baby boomer, to live through the legacy of Frank Borman, have him on my wall as a teenager, as my astronaut heroes, probably something I sent to NASA. My cousin Terry Delapina, if she's watching this, yes, I do have a Frank Borman autograph that she got me when he was running a car lot. After running Eastern Airlines, as many of us know, after becoming an astronaut, he had a series of car dealerships in the South, and I got his autograph through my cousin Terry Delapina, a beautiful lady. Thank you very much, Terry. But that's my way of saying I'll never forget the drama of going to the moon for the first time. And they were orbiting the moon. That was a big deal. We were going to get the first signal from when they got behind the moon and that they were alive. And of course they were. 10 revolutions. And on Christmas Eve, that evening, they read from the Bible book of Revelation, of Genesis. And, it's just a beautiful thing. Borman said this about what he saw out the command windows of the moon, quote, "A vast, lonely, forbidding expanse of nothing." That's what Borman said. Now, he retired. He'd had enough putting his family. The families go through an awful lot, and we kind of know that, but you're not in one of those families to be going through that. And some of the astronauts, particularly shuttle astronauts, not were talked out of, but they knew that it was best for their family not to go to space again. So Borman never returned to space. However, Marty, you know where he was when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, don't you? Why don't you share that with us, if you would? Or yeah, go ahead. Do you know where Frank Borman was when Apollo 11 landed on the moon?
Oh, I thought you meant when he lifted off.
No.
Oh no.
He was beside President Richard Nixon. He was the commentary for Nixon at the White House. He probably would have rather been at Johnson Space Center, but he was the ambassador at that time. So here's what they said, and a good way to remember Frank Borman, a beautiful Earth that he saw from space like this. Borman said this, and at the end of a live video broadcast on December 24th, 1968, and I'm telling you, I'm in my PJs waiting for Santa Claus to come. I was 13 years old, so I was pretty grown up in many ways, but there's still the excitement of Christmas Eve, seeing my heroes orbiting the moon. I had a telescope out in the backyard, dragging everybody out there to look at it. Of course, you couldn't see the astronauts. Here's how Borman ended that transmission. Quote, "And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close the night with good night, good luck, and a Merry Christmas. And God bless all of you on the good Earth." And that is an iconic moment in space history forever that Frank Borman, who's died at age 95, we will never forget. Well, let's go to the space history part of it. Like I said, what an irony that on this date, November 9th, 1967, at what would it have been? About 2 in the afternoon, maybe. The first uncrewed test flight of the Saturn V launch vehicle was launched. It was assembled, of course, at the Vehicle Assembly Building. The first to be launched from Complex 39 here on Merritt Island, over there on Merritt Island. The all up tests, meaning all rocket stages and spacecraft were fully functional in the initial flight, was a first for NASA. It was the first time the S-1C first stage and the S-2 second stage flew. It also demonstrated the S-4B third stage first in-flight restart, which had to do that. That was the restart, put them on the way to the moon. The mission used a Block 1 command and service module, modified with several revisions to be done for the Block 2, including heat shield. So this is 1967 November, Marty. And of course, we know we lost the Apollo 1 astronauts in that previous January, 1967. So the mission was the first flight after the stand down from the Apollo 1 fire, designated Apollo 4 because there had been 3 previous uncrewed Apollo Saturn flights in 1966 using the Saturn 1B vehicle. The mission lasted almost 9 hours, splashing down the Pacific Ocean, achieving all mission goals. NASA deemed the mission a complete success because it proved that Saturn V worked. This was a very important step in the objective of landing astronauts on the moon and bringing them back safely before the end of the decade. Known as AS Apollo Saturn 501, it was the largest launch vehicle ever to be attempted to be flown. George Mueller was head of Johnson Manned Space Flight Center at the time, we called Johnson Space Flight Center. What a accomplishment for Werner von Braun, the architect of this mighty beast. That was maybe a year behind schedule on there, but it provided also some footage of some of the most iconic images ever. We keep going back to Frank there. This one that that Marty chose as our backdrop there, and trying to see where the okay, there we go. Now I forgot that figured out. Where is the Block 1 spacecraft that flew? And that's there it is. It was at Stennis Space Center until early 2012, and it's on display at the Infinity Science Center of Fred Hayes. Now I remember where that's at. It's not Fred Hayes's museum. He supports it in so many ways because it's in Burlington, Mississippi, near his hometown of Biloxi, right on the Louisiana border. So this was really quite an amazing mission. Very few anomalies, and it gave to us, Marty. I didn't have a chance to rack up the picture, but it gave to us this picture on the bottom that I'm sure many of you know have seen the movie of the stage separations and it falling away, and then you see the ignition start. But as that's falling away, the interstage has got flames coming off of it from residual fuel. You all seen that, and that is on this mission, Apollo 4. It was armed with cameras. 2 motion picture cameras were mounted on the thrust section of the S2 second stage for verification of proper staging. Cameras were jettisoned after first stage separation at 200,000 feet. They re-entered the atmosphere and parachuted to the ocean for recovery. Both were recovered, so there's footage from both sides. And documentaries often use footage of one of the most used pieces shows the interstage of first and second stages falling away. This footage has been mistakenly attributed to Apollo 11 mission, which was actually filmed on the flights Apollo 4 and 6. So very cool that now you know that about the very, very underrated Apollo 4 mission. It was actually, like I said, the all-ups of the Saturn V rocket. Here are all of the Saturn V missions that from Apollo 1 to 6, which you should probably have that 4 is what they mean on there. Or maybe it says 4. Okay, good. And up to Skylab. Never a failure. Okay. And Marty, when you're underneath it out there at the Saturn V Center here, Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, it sure is something to behold. And just so intricate. And of course, a lot of it's fuel. So share that with you folks today. Well, next up, we're going to share one very important mission of the space shuttle era, and that is this mission of 51A. 51A has these astronauts. Fred Houck is making his second flight. The Eagle, prominently displayed there. This is a November 8th mission when it started. I believe, yeah, November 8th, 1984. So it's 39 years ago. And this was one of the first EVAs that marked the first time that the shuttle deployed 2 communication satellites, and then it retrieved 2 other communication satellites, which were deployed earlier by 41B a year earlier, but they were in proper orbits. And so the shuttle went up there as a truck to grab them and bring them back. It took 2 up and brought 2 back. And don't think that ever happened again. It was the 14th flight of the shuttle program, but it was designated the 51A designation for the government accounting office, the 5 being 1985 budget. You know, the budget year goes from October to October. So November was in the 1985 budget. 1 meant launch from Kennedy. They're intending the 2 to be from Vandenberg. And A is the first flight of that budget year, so to speak, and they all get jumbled around. They kept this numeric alphabet system until 51L, the Fateful Challenger mission, and then 26 was the next there on there. Well, thank you, Tommy Usiak, for taking this photo. Talked to Tom, like I said, he broke the news to us about Frank Borman passing away, and that the info is on Robert Perlman's Collect Space website. So here is Houck leading them out, just flight suits, okay? Just, it's sort of like, you know, could I wear my dad's jacket, members only jacket, maybe back in the time, Marty? It didn't matter. This was not for safety at all. They thought that the shuttle here in its 14th flight was operating like a truck to space. The woman in the background is Anna Fisher, her only space flight. Dale Gardner was his second and last space flight. Uh, Joe Allen, his second and last space flight. And he did a untethered spacewalk to retrieve one of those satellites. And Dave Walker, it was the pilot, his first space flight. Not sure how many walkers down, didn't get a chance to look that up. But there's the walkout, which Tom Musiak, a young man at the time, one of his first shuttle flights, he's among a pool of photographers there, and told me it was just, he'd been to several others, and this was pretty routine. He doesn't remember a scrub. Everybody was just sort of business as normal, and in those days, that's what they were thinking. We're gonna have this truck we can charge millions of dollars to take AT&T and Intelsats up there, college observatory telescopes, things like that, and go up and repair them. And here is a spacewalk that was Allen and Gardner did the spacewalks together. So that's one of them retrieving the Palapa 2, I think is what they were there, an Indian satellite. So this was quite an involved mission. The untethered spacewalks were the last until 1994, and it was the last use of the manned maneuvering unit. But it worked, and that's sort of a catcher there that they would attack. There was an adapter at one end of this satellite to bring it back in. And look at the dramatic footage of this and bring it into the payload bay. Those are very big satellites. So what a historic mission, very much in the wheelhouse of what the shuttle was sold to Congress to do, was become a space truck and pay for itself and make money, meanwhile gaining experience to build space stations, go to the moon and beyond. And as we know, it was harder than it thought. The turnaround time was on the order of months instead of weeks, as predicted, and the most they ever launched in 1 year was 9, and usually 4 to 5 was the norm, as 135 of them were launched, and of course 133 of them came back safely. Let's see a couple highlights more of that. Oh, there's Tommy's beautiful launch there of this mission. Hasselblad camera, perfect shot. That, I mean, you can't get better than that, Marty. That is so classic right there. Of the mission. This was the second flight of Orbiter Discovery. Didn't mention that. OV-103, the workhorse of the fleet. There's Gardner and Joe Allen up there, and they had a sign that said repair or something like that up close for sale. There's Dale Gardner holding the sign. We brought it back, and now we're going to sell it on the open market up there, or their services are for sale. That was what I believe that sign really meant, is spacewalk workers are here for sale. Beautiful shuttle in the background, or under robotic arm. There they've got one of them strapped back in there. Amazing, Marty, that they could figure out how to bring that back. Of course, I think ballast is a big issue of landing. And then there's Mark Usiak, little brother, captured the wheels down right over some palm trees over here at Kennedy Space Center. How many days was that mission? They did 2 EVAs for 11 hours. It was an 8-day mission, and landing on runway 15. Footage of the landing that Mark Usiak shot here was used, not the footage he shot, but he took this picture. The footage of the landing was used in the opening scenes of the 1995 IMAX movie, The Dream is Alive. So it was the third shuttle landing at the KSC. And this was the 5th and last shuttle mission of 1984. So they didn't fly anybody in December. So, well, we hope that you've enjoyed this look back at our space shuttle era, the Saturn launch of Apollo 4, first all up, and the irony that Frank Borman has passed away on this date. when he took a ride on that. Marty wanted to look back a year ago. Hope I don't jinx us. You look up there. You know what was going on there? Hurricane Nicole was about to hammer down on us. Gary Gerald, thank you for Gary Gerald in Georgia. He snuck a trip to the Space Center and was over at the Family Day, Marty, Saturday. Sent me some pictures of him and his wife Donnie in the looking at the Starliner. So we're going to show those tomorrow. So thank you for sharing those, Gary Gerald. This is us covered up for Hurricane Nicole, which did do quite a bit of damage, not to our museum, but some things around here. Dave Stange, good to see you. Cynthia Rossi, glad she's going to be for the Lausma Schweikert autograph session, Marty. Also got Doug Forrest is watching, Cliff Watson, Neil 1030. Cliff, of course, is in Australia. Hope it's warming up there for you, mate, and you got some pretty flowers going on. You're always welcome to send me some pictures there, buddy. Bill Whiting, Tom, great to see Bill. Tom Usiak, Tom Celentano up there getting his winter closeout up there in Connecticut. And Space Nerd, thank you for watching today. We know that you all enjoyed yesterday's show. What did we do yesterday?
Terry White.
Yeah, Terry White. I'm like going, I know we had a show yesterday, but Space Nerd had a great question about the tile being, why are they not in a row with the re-entry? Why are they not like this going in and they're at an angle where it's the tip of going in? And that's for that reason. So it distributes the energy in an even way. Great question there, Space Nerd. Well, we're going to end it also with a couple other images. You might be out stargazing or just looking around while the dog's doing its business, and you see this go in the sky. That is definitely a meteor, but we call that a bolide. Okay. A gorgeous bolide that a friend of mine, George Fleener, captured. There's George's name right there in Bradenton, Florida, a while back, but it's nevertheless a good image to show you that any moment a piece of cosmic debris enter our Earth's atmosphere at 30,000 miles an hour will burn up instantly. If it's the size of a sand grain or salt grain, it's just going to be a quick little wisp and be as bright as these stars that are in this image. But if it's the size of a pea or, God forbid, a baseball, this is probably the size of maybe a tennis ball. No, ping pong ball. Let's make it smaller than that. Or a cherry or something. The bigger they are, the wilder they burn up and blow up. So it just had two little puffs in it. If you see something like that, you might hear it, and you'll never forget it. So keep your eyes up, looking around the sky. You'll see some meteors and satellites. Also, I stuck this in here just to remember our veterans over our weekend here. And like I said, we'll be having our memorabilia show going to the afternoon at 3 o'clock. So, we will be honoring veterans all over our country there with our great American Eagle. You will be seen at dark. Just look to the east and you will see a bright star. You can't miss it. You're going to think it's an airplane coming in. It's the planet Jupiter. This is an amateur photo I made years ago showing the red spot. And you can see this a little clearer than this photo, actually, through a telescope. And we're going to be doing that starting maybe next week here at the American Space Museum, having some telescope moon watches. And there is Saturn. Now, Marty sent me a story out of the newspaper that Saturn's rings are going to disappear in a year and a half. And it's absolutely correct. Where are they going to go? Well, it's in the plane of sight that it's going to disappear. If I use this, no, that black's not good. If I use this as an example, as the rings, we're actually seeing the rings at a tilt of maybe something like this, okay? But, so my head is the Saturn, and the rings are tilted like this. But as Saturn goes around the sun once every 30 years, and the Earth every 365 days, where Saturn is and where the Earth is and where our tilt is makes this go like this from top to bottom. And right now we're looking at the northern hemisphere of Saturn, because the pictures are always upside down. And it's going to go to the southern hemisphere, but it'll be edge on in about a year. And people are going to say, look at Saturn. I go, well, where are the rings? I go, well, come back in about a month, because for about a month they'll be so narrow that you won't see them. All right. How narrow are the rings? Glad you asked, Marty. If I use this sheet of paper as an example of how thick the rings are, all right, they're very thin. They're 200,000 miles wide. So from tip to tip, it's almost to the moon. So each side's about 100,000 miles wide. So Marty, if they're the thickness, and I'll give you a clue, at no point are these gorgeous rings more than a half a mile thick. Actually, it's a quarter mile. They are less than a quarter mile thick at any place. They're rubble, they're rock, they're ice, and the moons can lift things up like a magnet lifts up iron filings and moves some of the ring around. Scientists, astronomers don't know if they're 10 million years old or 1 billion years old. They don't know. There's theories for both. But Marty, if that quarter of a mile is the thickness of this paper, how wide do you think the paper is in ratio of the ring's width? If this is the thickness of the rings, how wide, how big a sheet of paper do I need to represent them? A mile?
I would think a lot more than a mile.
Yeah.
But
Not more than 100 miles?
probably more than that.
That's actually 20 miles. Yeah. 20, this sheet of paper, 20 miles wide, and that thickness is the ratio that these flimsy rings are in. So when you look at them, it's truly amazing. We might be, they might not have been there, like I said, 500,000 years ago. Did the Earth have rings? Well, it may have. And we'll get into that when we talk more about Saturn. We've got all winter to look at it and talk about it. So I do. Now, where's Saturn in the sky? When you see Jupiter directly rising so bright, look 90 degrees overhead, a little to the south, you're going to see a bright star there. That is Saturn. It'll look kind of yellowish, whereas Jupiter looks definitely more goldish there. So both have cloud bands you can see. Saturn is 1 billion miles away. Jupiter's 800 million miles away. So, and everything can fit inside of Jupiter. That's what's really incredible. Everything in the solar system, all the moons, all the planets, everything except, of course, the sun can fit inside of Jupiter. It is so huge. That's why it's so bright, reflecting all that light. Well, Marty, thank you for a great Streamlabs job. We wanted to thank this guy who I forgot about. Terry White, what a great talk Terry did, just talking about the wings of the space shuttle on the top and the bottom, and we enjoyed that. I enjoyed that, Marty. I learned a lot, and Terry wants to come back and do more talks like that. And his brother sent him this space shuttle door gunner patch from somewhere out there. Like that's going to happen, right? But people think of some crazy things out there. So thank you, Terry White, for all you do to help promote the American Space Museum, as well as devoting your time once a month to be on a Stay Curious podcast. So, Marty, that's it for us today. Let me go back up there and just put Mr. Frank Borman up there to let people know that here is a man that I don't know. I do know from what people say about his command. And when we have Jay Honeycutt back on again to do part 2 of his mission simulating career, where he was a mission simulator for Frank Borman. And I know he mentioned to me in talking about the program he's going to follow up his first one with, that Frank Borman was a commander that was going to be on time, get things done the way NASA and everybody planned on doing it. And was the perfect man to orbit the moon for the first time, with his good friend Jim Lovell, who survives him at age 95, and Bill Anders, who's also a youngster, I believe, at 89. So God bless the family of Frank Borman. The American Space Museum sends its condolences to his family and friends, and we will certainly talk more about this great American, Mr. Frank Borman, who has passed away at age 85. Until tomorrow, Marty, when we talk about all the events we have in our galaxy of giving, I thank you for all that you've done today, and our great director, Karan Conklin, how we've been pulling our hair out organizing these things. Can't do it without our whole team here, and they're part very much of the team that puts on Stay Curious 5 days a week, and we're glad you enjoy it. So until tomorrow, I'm Mark Marquette saying, God rest Frank Borman, and I'll see you again to bridge the space between us.